Now it's time for No Pucks Given with Dan Kingerski of Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Penguin Scoops locker room buzz and straight-up analysis. No fluff, all hockey. Now, here's Dan.
It is No Pucks Given here on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms. Hi, I'm Dan Kingerski, and it is just after midnight, so technically it is Monday morning. I am in a hotel room in Boston. I've never seen a hotel room with surround sound. For those of you on the video side, you can see that over my shoulder. Also, because I am an Expedia VIP, because I book so darn many rooms, give me that little bottle of champagne, which I may or may not finish before the end of this podcast. There are a handful of things we're going to talk about here on the podcast. No Anthony Jardine in this week's episode because it's so late here. I wasn't going to bother Anthony to join me. And Vince Comunale, who was supposed to kind of be a regular fixture here, had a late hockey game Sunday night and couldn't do it Monday morning with us. So I'm going solo. Then again, I am a radio guy at heart still, even if I am fully immersed in print, and that's where my bones are. I came up through the radio world. I can handle a show by myself. What we're going to talk about is the dominoes that have fallen since Bryan Rust missed the last two games. It really is stunning, the impact. If Bryan Rust wanted to tell Kyle Dubas that he can't trade him, the last two games could not have gone better for Bryan Rust's case to remain a Penguin. That's for sure. I'm going to kind of dovetail that conversation into some of the trade talk that I want to get into. I did circle 4 young players that you can keep an eye on, 2 of whom I know are available, 2 of whom I assume are available. And I did that on Pittsburgh Hockey Now Sunday afternoon, just with all the travel. I didn't get to it until about 12:30, but we got that up. And I'm going to kind of set the table here for the Penguins' second half of the season, because that also is going to inform, dictate, shape, direct the trade direction of the Penguins as well. So we're going to do all of that. First, I want to say thank you. Like, subscribe, set your downloads. We are on the Odyssey Podcast Network. We are Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and Amazon as well. So by all means, please take care of that so that, you get these shows delivered directly to you on Monday. It'll be Monday, January 12th. This is episode, I think, 45 of No Pucks Given. I also put out the call late Sunday night, just before we started recording, for a few Q&As. Because I am doing the show by myself, I figured I'd toss that out there and see what comes back. And I want to give a little shout out to Jack Studley. Yes, that is his real name. My brand new Boston Hockey Now beat writer. I just can't tell you how gratifying it is when I see a young writer get a big opportunity. He's worked his way up. He was at another outlet in Boston, and I called the owner of this outlet, and I said, "Hey, do you have any?" Because the owner in Boston at Black and Gold Productions likes to hire young writers and work with them and give them opportunity. And I called my buddy Mark, who owns the B&G. Said, "Hey, Mark, do you have anybody who's ready for that bigger step? Credentials and covering in the locker room and really becoming a beat writer?" And he said, "Yeah, I got a guy for you." Jack Studley was that, and Jack has attacked Boston Hockey Now with an enthusiasm that I enjoy. He actually Jack outworked me in the press room tonight. He was there after I was packing up and heading out for a little late night dinner. And I just appreciated the daylights. I appreciated the hell out of that. No two ways about it. To see him taking that care, and I was just so happy. So kudos to Jack. Check out Boston Hockey Now. Follow Jack on Twitter. I mean, there's only one guy on Twitter named Jack Studley. Actually, his real name is John. So if you're older like me, you're like Big John Studley. But that, yeah, that reference would be lost on I think most. Anywho, let's get into the hockey talk portion of No Pucks Given, shall we? Before we dive into the Bryan Rust and the trade and the second half of the season and any questions, I actually haven't checked Twitter, or rather X, yet. Before we get into that, I'm going to just drive straight into the storm of this Kevin Hayes nonsense that has, I don't know who started it. I can't fathom there are that many people who are that ignorant or clueless as to see a fact exist in the universe and then decide, well, you know what, that fact means something entirely different, and create this entire correlation without any sort of understanding of causation. It boggled my mind. I let it go for like a few minutes, and then I kept sort of getting inundated with the Penguins have a losing record with Kevin Hayes in the lineup. Like, well, yeah. Given the timing, of course they do. And that was just like, bouncing my head off a wall, a brick wall. I'm just going to explain this to you here because I think you and I can talk. You're coming here, No Pucks Given, or Pittsburgh Hockey Now, for Dan Kingerski content, which generally means you are not coming here for just banal, or you're not coming here for the basics. We do content at Pittsburgh Hockey Now just a little differently, and it's not for everybody. It's for real, people who are a little bit more into what's going on and want to know some things, or want to go to that next level of debate. That's just how we built PHN, and I'm forever grateful that there were enough of you that are like, yeah, let's do this. Yes, the Penguins have a losing record when Kevin Hayes is in the lineup. Now, let me explain the lack of causation and correlation. Do you know who was not in the lineup when Kevin Hayes came back to the Penguins lineup? Evgeny Malkin and Blake Lizotte. Do you think that might have had a little something to do with it? Kevin Hayes is the 13th forward, for gosh sakes. To blame the 13th forward, you would have to have specific plays and details that led to losses. Oh, well, in the third period, his turnover here created this goal. Can't do that because it never happened. So when he comes back into the lineup, the Penguins were just finishing up their 8-game unbeaten streak. They're on top of the world, but they were also winning some games they had no business winning. Remember that December 4th game in which Evgeny Malkin actually was injured? Tampa Bay beat the Penguins pillar to post, took them to the woodshed, took them out in public, and just treated them like a trailer park kid in Walmart. Just, it was ugly. And yet the Penguins won. Well, the hockey gods were like, yeah, that's not going to happen again. So the hockey gods exacted a little bit of revenge on the Penguins. They lost some late leads. Can you blame Kevin Hayes on that? No. The Penguins then no-showed some losses. Can you blame Kevin Hayes on that? No. So what are you doing, really? that is probably the part that really got under my skin was not specifically Kevin Hayes, but what it represented, the bigger picture of it, that Pittsburgh has had a hockey team for just about, coming up on 60 years now. And how little Penguins fans want to know about the game. There is a much larger Penguins fandom that goes well beyond PHN, goes well beyond you and I. It does get frustrating that this sort of witch doctor logic can become so prevalent. It made me mad. Not because I have some great relationship with Kevin Hayes, but because it was just so steeped and dripping in ignorance. I'm like, come on. Have I made no impact whatsoever in this market? I understand, until the last 10 years. And I want to give credit to Jesse Marshall, who preceded me by a little bit. But until then, there really wasn't anybody breaking down hockey and doing chalkboards and plays and explaining the nuts and bolts. I like to think Pittsburgh hockey now has sort of set a certain standard in doing that. And yet, it's like, I've failed. I've failed you. So no, I'm not going to be addressing the Kevin Hayes nonsense. If I see that, you're basically telling me, "Hi, Dan, I'm an idiot, and I want to just take up your time." I hesitate to think what the Penguins players would think if they saw that. I mean, Kevin Hayes is not supposed to be a top 6 player. That's not his role in the team, and it's just it's a good bit of silliness that everybody has to be a 25 goal scorer or they're terrible, and I surrender sometimes. Okay, Bryan Rust missed the last 2 games. The Penguins in that time have scored a total of 1 goal. 1 single goal in the last 2 games. I actually, now that I say that out loud, I think I said on the post-game video they've scored 2 goals in 2 games. Well, they haven't. They've scored 1 goal in 2 games. So what is going on? I don't know that I criticized Dan Muse's predecessor over his line construction, quite like I criticized Muse for it Sunday. I had other criticisms of Sullivan. I thought Muse was trying a little too hard to find something. And I thought it led him astray. Keeping Evgeny Malkin on the wing, there's a little something unique in that to me. Without Bryan Rust, they're efforting to keep Ben Kindle at center. Okay, I suppose I see those reasons and why a team, a coach, a GM would want that. Okay, it's not like I haven't advocated for Malkin to move to the wing, so okay. But the Penguins clearly were not in sync offensively Saturday. And that continued into Sunday, didn't it? That even in the second half of the game, when they were trying to bombard Boston, they couldn't get that extra puck. They couldn't get that extra space in the slot. They couldn't get that extra space down near the net. Ricard Raquel was incredibly frustrated after the game. He was taking those sides. I didn't keep him long. When the TV camera, I don't know who the TV cameras talked to. I think they were talking to Anthony Mantha or I think Parker Wotherspoon. I'm not sure. where the media scrum went, I looked around and I went to Ricard Raquel because I thought, especially in the third period, he and Sid were just doing their darndest to get that tying goal. And Ricard Raquel had certainly a unique take on it. And I'm going to grab his quote here. I thought it led, I think it furthered my criticism of the line construction, because I said, do you regret not fighting hard enough? Do you think the team didn't fight hard enough to get that space? And he said, yeah, for sure. We would have made some different decisions out there, been more on the same page. That whole been more on the same page was kind of a little bell for me. Like ding, ding, ding. And here is sort of part and parcel. This is all issues, kind of just lining them up and knocking them down. This is about winning games now. You've come to game 44, 58% chance to make the playoffs. You've come this far. You don't need to make sure that Ben Kindle plays an extra couple or a few minutes in this game. And really, the Penguins would have been better off had the line changes that happened in the final few minutes of the game happened 20 plus minutes earlier. And I thought they were a fairly obvious change, and that is taking Tommy Novak and putting him back at center between the towers, Justin Brazeau and Anthony Mantha. That would also mean taking Mantha off the top line with Sidney Crosby and Ricard Raquel, but that line with Mantha, Novak, and Brazeau had been so good for several weeks that it seemed like the Penguins needed that sort of secondary jolt. If Evgeny Malkin is going to play the wing, put him on Sidney Crosby's wing. Not Ben Kindle's, not Kevin Hayes' line. Sidney Crosby's line. And then you let your fourth line wreak havoc like they do. Blake Lizotte, Connor Dewar, Noel Acciari. You don't expect them to score the goal, but you know they have a reasonable chance, a better than average chance, to get the puck in the offensive zone and create some pressure so that you get Sidney Crosby back on the ice in the O-zone. Now, somebody on Twitter, on X, astutely picked up on what I just said. It said, hey, wait, what about Kindle and Chinakhov? I didn't answer it on X because I figured I would bring it here to answer. And my thought was, what about them? It's about that tying goal. It's about winning the game. It's not about making sure that Kindle gets a couple extra minutes Sunday. It's not about any of that anymore. So Kindle and Chinakhov, Rutger McGroarty, Ville Koivunen, the young players who have sort of comprised that kids line and rolled through the Penguins lineup this season, they've gotten experience. Reams and reams of resume paper to work on. Now it's about winning games. And you don't need to keep 4 lines when you could create 3 better lines. And with Bryan Rust's absence, you really only have 3 lines to create who can score, who have that sort of proclivity. The young players will be able to. Let's be honest, though. Kindle only has how many goals at even strength? It would not have been the end of the world to shorten the bench Sunday and just get after it. That happened late. It could have happened a good bit sooner. My feeling was, and this is pure feeling, if the Penguins had done that much sooner, they probably win that game because they get the tying goal. And if they get the if they broke Korpisalo, they were going to run him out of the barn. By the way, I looked it up. You guys remember Alexei Morozov, the generation next? He used to torture Martin Brodeur of the Devils. I mean, here's a guy who's like a 15-goal scorer who really never hit his potential in the NHL with the Penguins. He became the leading scorer of the KHL when he went back to Russia. With the Penguins, he was part of the Milan Kraft and all of those guys who, none of whom really panned out. But when Alexei Morozov played the New Jersey Devils and Martin Brodeur was in net, you could set your watch by Morozov scoring, including a hat trick one night. Pretty sure he had a hat trick. This is 23 years ago, we're talking. 22, 23 years ago. Joonas Korpisalo does that to the Penguins. He is the very definition of the Alexei Morozov syndrome. Korpisalo has a .900 career save percentage, .888 this season. Do you know what his career save percentage against the Penguins is? It's now .928. Yeah, he plays the Penguins. He is going to stop every puck, and I guess I knew that intrinsically, that Korpisalo tortured them with Ottawa prior, and like, why aren't the Penguins killing this guy? And he just seems to stop pucks against the Penguins, and they got a good healthy dose of that. I thought he made some really good saves. He directed his rebounds away from the traffic around the net, and he was really good. Having said all of that, the Penguins definitely needed to win that game on Sunday. I'm going to talk a bit about the trade market, Penguins, who we should be watching, and we'll wrap up this No Pucks Given here on the Odyssey Podcast Network after this. And welcome back on the Odyssey Podcast Network. This is No Pucks Given, episode 45 from my Boston hotel room. And yes, that is a surround sound over my shoulder. I have no idea how it works. I didn't need to. These days, I must tell you, these days get really long. I had to be at the Pittsburgh airport Sunday morning at a little after 5 a.m. It's now midnight. Actually, it's after midnight as I'm talking. It's just about 12:30 a.m. Been a long day. Yet somehow these crazy days energize me. I can't explain it. I suppose this is why you don't see a lot of old beat writers in healthy and good shape. It is just, I don't know. It's a lot of fun. So let's talk a little bit, or a lot, about some trade targets that we can look at for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the second half. I do say they've come this far. There's no turning back now. Sure, if somebody comes with a king's ransom for Rickard Rakell, Kyle Dubas probably makes the move. The same is true for Bryan Rust, although I wonder if Dubas, even with a king's ransom in hand, would say, nah, call me in the summer. Talk to me in June. And puts down the phone because the Penguins have come this far. That's the one thing that none of us can know until Dubas maybe starts talking on one of his team hosted shows with Josh Getzoff. I think Vuki did this week, so we couldn't parse and quote Dubas and try to glean exactly what he's thinking. I suppose we'll get there in time. We'll figure it out, especially when Dubas and J.P. Barry meet during the Olympic break. J.P. Barry is Evgeny Malkin's agent, and they have a big meeting in February set up to discuss Evgeny Malkin's future. I think I know how that's going to go, but I suppose it behooves us all to wait for it to happen. I'm actually trying to open this little bottle of champagne. Yeah, Expedia leaves this for me because I'm a VIP and I stayed at like one of their VIP hotels in Boston. Not because it's a VIP hotel, but because it's actually was the most cost-effective place to stay in downtown Boston. Believe me, I do not spend on perks and frills and all of that. The trade targets for the Pittsburgh Penguins, I specifically limited the scope to young players. I would be floored if we saw the Penguins go after some veterans, or especially some rental veterans, who were not or are not going to be around long term. I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather when the Penguins acquired Luke Schenn from Nashville in the Tommy Novak deal last year. I was like, what in the... I suppose I took Kyle Dubas's explanation at face value, that he wanted the experience, he wanted the locker room presence. I think we saw what Kyle Dubas was in fact doing. He was commoditizing Luke Schenn, which, just the way things work, he had to do immediately instead of waiting, and he got a second-round pick for him. Winnipeg's fall this year sure makes that second-round pick pretty valuable. It might be on the cusp of the first round. Not a bad move by Kyle Dubas. There are 4 players, though, that I circled. Speaking of those Winnipeg Jets, Brad Lambert is 22 years old, hasn't cracked the NHL yet. He was a first-round pick, 30th overall, granted, back in 2022. Skates really well, but he's a perimeter guy to this point. He had 55 points in his first professional year, 23-24, so that was 2 years ago. He dipped last year, and he's down again this year. A Finnish kid. Maybe I'm being a little bit stereotypical, but I always assume that the Finns know how to get between the dots, because they play a grittier game than do the Swedes. It's a cultural battle that the Finns are going to be a little grittier. That's their advantage over the Swedes. If you don't think those two countries have a hockey rivalry, let me tell you something. Yet it hasn't worked in Winnipeg, in part because Winnipeg is so stacked. I mean, Winnipeg's top 6, top 9, loaded with veterans. A kid who doesn't, steal a spot isn't going to get in. That's kind of where Brad Lambert is. Frank Saravalli of the Bleacher Report now reported in late December that Lambert and his people had been given permission to seek a trade elsewhere. Well, yeah, he would do well in the Penguins organization, I think, because of the speed, because of the tools he has, a pretty good hockey IQ. And I think Kyle Dubas values a hockey IQ. In fact, I know he does. Look at Ben Kindle and a lot of the players they drafted in 2025. Hockey IQ was on every single one of their scouting reports. He is falling. He's a right-handed center, which is never a bad thing. You can also probably move him to wing and really use his speed around the edge and get to the net. I'm trying to open this little bottle. Ooh, there we go. I would never drink on the air, but now since it's a podcast, cheers. And since I've been up since, geez, it's more than an 18-hour day at this point. I don't know why I do this stuff. Brad Lambert is probably the top name on my list. And the reason I say that is because of the entire Bryan Rust situation, where the Penguins organization, think about this, there are no scoring wingers in the Penguins organization. I suppose Will Horkoff might become that. Technically, he hasn't signed yet. Bill Zonin might be a scoring winger or a power center. Don't know where he's going to be, but he's not in the organization, not playing for the organization just yet. He had a hat trick, I think, on Saturday or Sunday, did he? I have to do some prospect research. But Zonin had a hat trick this weekend. I like him very much, by the way. Still, the Penguins do not have scoring wingers at the ready developing. A guy like Brad Lambert, it would certainly add youth and maybe fix a problem. The other guy for the Winnipeg Jets that, in fact, let me share my screen with you. You can probably tell I'm getting a little bit tired too. I can hear my voice beginning to go. Screen share. Penguins trade talk. Pittsburgh hockey now. There we go. Ville Heinola, 24 years old. He's getting to that end of the runway with Winnipeg. He's played 50-some NHL games. So he's not 53 NHL games. He's not a stranger to the NHL. Lightning fast. That was the thing that jumped out at me. I've seen him play, absolute wheels on this left-handed defenseman. I put him on the list because do the Penguins want to recall Ryan Graves? Do they want to recall Owen Pickering? Could they use a left-handed defenseman with real offensive instincts? And the answer is yes. They don't have any of those. They have left-handed defensemen, Pickering and Graves. They don't have any with offensive chops. So Heinola would sort of be a very unique addition to the Penguins organization. And a guy who can skate like that, from what I gather, and defensemen are so difficult to break down for someone like me. I mean, you really have to study video, I believe, to break down defensemen. Is the stick in the right hand? Did they take the right gap in the angle? And there's so much that happens in real time that I don't have time to really dig into it, or quite frankly, sometimes I don't even have the knowledge to really dig into an NHL defenseman or a prospect defenseman and how far away they are. Heinola, yeah, he's got the skills, he's got the tools, so that would be a unique addition to the Penguins organization. I wasn't necessarily sold on adding Brennan Othmann, the New York Rangers disgruntled prospect. He's on the list because I've certainly been surprised and wrong before, and I certainly didn't want to exclude somebody who could be a trade target for the Penguins. The Rangers GM, Chris Drury, was sort of adamant that he wasn't going to sell low on Othmann, even though Othmann wants out. The Rangers don't really want him in. but they won't sell him either. You got to love this part of hockey, right? This part of GMing and this part of playing where it's like, okay, yeah, we need to trade him. Then that fear, that fear of trading somebody at a low point only to watch them become everything you thought they could be when you drafted them kicks in. And you've got this horrible sort of first cousin to FOMO. I think the Rangers have that with Othmann. The one name I put on here, the fourth name that we'll talk about, is Jacob Pelletier. I would say he's fading. Faded prospect, Jacob Pelletier. He couldn't crack the lineup really, with any consistency in Calgary. They chuck him in kind of a faded prospects deal to Philadelphia last season. Philly sends, oh boy, Morgan Frost and who was the other prospect that they sent to Calgary? Darn it. If I weren't so jelly-brained, I would definitely know this. Actually, wait, it's in my story. Somewhere. I know I wrote it. Hang on, let me find it. Oh, darn. I didn't include all of the names. But anyway, the Flyers sent a couple of prospects to Calgary for Pelletier and Kuzmenko. Pelletier is such a great skater. He's got offensive instincts. He's another guy that wants to default to the perimeter, needs to get stronger. He's languishing in the AHL, putting up more than a point per game. And he's doing it for Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is just reeling off the wins. Their lineup is stacked. Pelletier would be such a low buy with a high reward, potentially high reward, no risk, high reward, that I put him on the list because he really is that very same sort of trade that the Penguins made for Philip Tomasino. Now, obviously, the Penguins didn't hit on Tomasino. They sure gave him a chance. And if you're going to have some injuries here in the second half of the season, I'll stop sharing the screen. Bryan Rust, Rutger McGroarty. It would behoove the Penguins to take a chance on a winger who can put the puck in the net. All right, that will do it for No Pucks Given. I will toast you here. It's actually not bad. Not bad for a free little bottle of Prosecco. I should not be drinking this after a 20-hour day, but what are you going to do? I actually have to be at the airport in 6 hours. Let me do the math. 5 hours. I have to be at the airport in 5 hours. But, I have to get up in 3 hours to do the Dan's Daily. I hope you enjoy the Dan's Daily. It might be one of the worst of the season. Or it might be one of the best. You just never know what's going to sometimes pop out of my brain. But I appreciate all of you very much. Oh, you know what? I forgot to do the Q&A. So we're gonna hold off on ending this. I'm going to look at X. And I'm going to roll rapid fire through some of these questions. From Peter says, why do I feel the Penguins seem so inconsistent? Well, it's because they've got inconsistent players. I know that sounds so obvious as to be stupid, but that really is just a fundamental truth. The Penguins have a handful or more players who have to really bring their A game to be effective. So when those players don't have their A game that night, they're not effective, and it really creates an ebb and flow for the team. Jim Stripsky, can Muse do anything to stop the team from taking stupid penalties? A couple of those tonight weren't stupid penalties. A couple of those tonight were, I thought, soft calls. Can he do anything? No, not really. By the way, when the Penguins go to the penalty box, yes, they seem to do so like the march of the Penguins. In reality, the statistics show that the Penguins are pretty close to even in terms of penalties earned and penalties taken. Does that shock you? They're like, I think, a 5 or 6 differential. I know. You're like, wait, what? Exactly. The Penguins have been the beneficiaries of a lot of penalties this season as well. Jim double dipped, but since actually Jim went for the hat trick. Well, let's see here. Good God, I'm not answering a Kevin Hayes question. Okay, Jim's second shot here. Is Dubas done taking bad contracts with term beyond this season to grab more draft picks? I would suspect. I don't know, by the way. Let me clarify full game here. I don't know exactly what Kyle Dubas is going to do, and I suspect that he is open-minded on some things. Open-minded might be the best way to put it. I would be surprised if he took on veterans with longer term. I think we're kind of that's the tough part about that, right? Because as I say it out loud, are we watching the Penguins turn the corner of a rebuild, or are we just watching sort of one good year before they have to hit bottom in a year or two? If we're watching them turn the corner, the Penguins absolutely cannot take veterans with term because you don't want that salary cap space to be eaten up. I wonder, I don't know about the Penguins' ownership situation. It was kind of weird to me. Here we are in Boston, and as far as I know, there were no FSG people around. None. Didn't see any. Didn't see any around the locker room. Maybe they had a box and just did their own thing. I mean, wouldn't you come over and watch your team play? But that's sort of why I think a lot of you never adopted FSG or have sort of a bad opinion of them, is you never felt cared about. And I understand that. But will the new folks have the money to waste? Will the new folks have the money to give to Kyle Dubas for him to buy draft picks, as he's done in the last couple of years with, the Hayes trade, the Matt Dumba trade? I'm trying to think of who else. Tommy Novak was a little bit of a salary dump as well. Am I missing anybody? I think I got everybody there. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, I don't know if the new owners are going to want to do that. Also, the Penguins have a ton of draft picks already. 15 in the top 3 rounds of the next 3 years. So I don't know that they really have to. I think Dubas has had enough of that. And this is me reading tea leaves here for you. When he responded about any hesitation when he made the Chinikov trade, he's like, nope, that's what it's going to cost. We have all these draft picks. We have to spend them, and we're going to spend them. Okay. I think we can take that to the bank. That we're probably going to watch Dubas spend those picks more so than acquire new ones. All right, my eyes are getting bleary. I'm looking at my computer screen here, and reading it is getting a little more difficult. I'm going to wrap it up. I do wildly appreciate all of you who have come along for the ride. Like, subscribe, download, yell at me, do whatever you want. It's all good, and it's all sport, I suppose. In the meantime, kids, well, have fun.